Hello, everybody. It's Isaac George, and yes, I'm back for a new round of info, fun, and frivolity for 2017. I haven't done a show. I think it was the end of October is when the last show happened, and it's really great to be back and in the studio once again, and with all of you listening out there. And last show which was sort of the seed that I planted, and you can go back to the archives on YinRadioTV on YouTube and check out the last show, which kind of covered the gamut in terms of what's going on with relationships and, some of the buzzwords around creating a kind of new paradigm relationship, and some of the stuff around twin flames, twin souls, soulmates, this nomenclature, this terminology that's kind of popular in the culture. I also was addressing some things that related to social context, but be that as it may, go back and listen to that show, and you can get a grounding in what I was talking about then. And this show is going to focus on the specifics around some of the spiritual and cultural and philosophical idioms that have to do with not just new paradigm relationship, but relationship as a spiritual path, relationship as a function of growth in the individual, growth opportunity in the individual, growth opportunity for people who partner, and as a growth opportunity for families, for community, and for countries and regions, and for that matter, the entire world. Now, there's been a lot that's happened just since the beginning of the year that I just want to touch on briefly, and especially since the inauguration of a new president in the United States, which has created a lot of controversy and a lot of reaction, and everybody's buttons have been pushed, so to speak. By this, it's the United States' version of what happened in the UK last year, which I spoke to briefly in the summer, which was Brexit. And there are other, upheavals and eruptions of things occurring all around the world in different parts of the world regarding social and political and economic and situations. And let's not forget climate change. And excuse me, but a sneeze is coming on. Whoa. I was able to stifle that so I wouldn't blow out your speakers and headphones. Here's the thing that a lot of people miss when they tune into a show like this. You think they're going to be, we're going to be talking about hearts and flowers. Yeah, in a sense, I do touch on those things, but it's not about hearts and flowers. It's about real connection. It's about what I like to talk about is what really matters, what really turns people on, what really turns them off about relationship, about what's going on, the dialogues about relationship, the things that are happening in the culture. There are all kinds of things. There's dating sites. There's the hookup culture. There's people experimenting with different relationship ideas like polyamory and extended family and all of these kinds of things in intentional community. All of these are worth a discussion on their own and very important in certain respects. But some people might think with all the things that are transpiring with Trump in the White House and, all of the uncertainty around that and other things, and the fact that he is almost an avowed misogynist, or according to way some people view him, that he has no respect for women, or very little, and that he's the prototype or the poster boy for everything that is wrong with the masculine in our culture and in our world today. So I'd like to address some of that in terms of what is potentially a process or a journey of healing for the masculine and for the feminine. And we've seen this polarization before, and we saw it in the feminine movement or feminism, which in a way was sort of a bit of a distortion around what we perceive or understand about what the feminine represents. So instead of being, at home wearing the apron, being the mother and the child rearer and the child bearer and rearer, then, the feminist view is, well, we want a piece of the action. We want to be just as empowered. We want to be part of the culture and equal pay and equal rights and equal benefits. All very, very important. Absolutely not taking anything away from that. But somewhere in the midst of that, there was a resentment for all the oppression that the masculine had laid on the feminine over many centuries and centuries of time. Control of the feminine, control of female energy, repression of sexuality, demonization of women. And through that, it was almost not too far a step to demonizing nature and demonizing or subjugating nature for the purposes of colonial expansion, taking the treasures of gold from the Incans, for example, in South America, and then creating what we have to deal with now is the effects of our industrial revolution, our technological age, and the effects that has had on the environment, our activities on the planet affecting the balance of life here. If you cannot see how this is all connected with how we treat each other as men and women, then we are missing an important understanding, an important piece in the whole formula, the whole view of what's going on. It's our relationship to ourselves, first and foremost. It's our relationship to our highest ideal about where we come from, what our true origins are, what our true history is, and what our true purpose is. So on that note, I will introduce what our subject matter is tonight, which is about finding the beloved. Well, finding the beloved isn't just a romantic fairy tale. It's not about just, riding off into the sunset with your sweetheart on the back of a horse, although that has certainly been romanticized or put out there as an image or an ideal that is worth aspiring to. But think about all the things that are in the culture or the books that movies have been based on in the last 10 or 15 years, a bit more realism, a bit more scary stuff too about male-female relationships in particular, but also some very inspiring things. One book that comes to mind is The Notebook. That became a popular movie starring Ryan Gosling and Rachel McAdams. The story of a true love is probably something each and every human being aspires to, no matter whether it's real or fictional. There is something about finding someone who really sees you and accepts you and understands you in every way and in every level. A sort of like meeting another version of yourself in another body. Well, this isn't a new concept, and even though in the last 25 to 30 years the alternative culture, what you call the New Age or things of that nature, have certainly promoted or exposed or made a lot of noise in media and also in the press or in books or in popular workshops and so forth about meeting your soulmate, meeting the beloved, meeting your perfect divine counterpart, meeting or attracting, there's workshops for attracting your perfect soulmate or your perfect partner. This is what gave rise to the interest in Tantra, for example. It's what gave rise to the interest in people going and trying to discover what it is that works in a relationship and what no longer works in a relationship. It's the whole idea of connection. It's the whole idea of feeling like you belong to something, not just for convenience sake, and not just for the sake of, as in the past, having a codependent relationship in which one finds oneself mutually dependent upon another, or putting the other person on a pedestal, but something that echoes inequality, in which two people can really learn to grow and expand through the vehicle, through the experience of relationship. But this is an ancient story. This isn't something that has its roots in New Age popular literature or Hollywood. Nobody has got a corner on this, but it's been around with the human race for a very, very long time. The archetypes that we can point to or use as an example from ancient times would be very popularly in the beginning of the 2000s. The era of the 2000 decade was the Da Vinci Code and the putting forth the idea that Jesus and Mary Magdalene had a relationship, not only a relationship, but they were married and they had a child, that they actually had a sexual relationship. This was very controversial and very, very upsetting for some. There was also in much older cultures, such as the Egyptian culture, the Sumerian culture, the Persian culture, in India, original Vedic culture there, all of these archetypes of paired couples, male-female couples, the masculine and feminine, divine masculine and feminine, paired in such a way that they would become a force for change, for positive change and growth in those cultures. Shiva and Shakti are two examples. There is also in the Persian culture the Inanna character, or the feminine goddess Inanna, and her counterpart or consort Dumuzi. In the Egyptian culture, Isis and Osiris. And then there's the Jesus Mary Magdalene template. There are a number of other stories in mythology and medieval times, such as Tristan and Isolde. And these are fated relationships in a sense, fated in almost kind of the Romeo and Juliet sense, but they had a function within the larger culture. They had a purpose within the larger culture. They were not insular. They did not retreat into the, woods to live in their cabin or to ride off into the sunset and be just happily ever after. That is perhaps part of it, but a lot of those relationships were very intense, from at least the stories we hear and the stories we read about, because the two individuals had such a powerful connection and because there was a strong reaction to them by their families or by their peers or by the culture at large that they were in, that they were somehow larger than life, and that they were somehow a threat to the status quo in some cases, that was something that needed to be controlled or dismissed or destroyed even. Plato, many hundreds of years ago, was the first one to actually use the term soulmate, I guess, in the sense of the twin soul, where the idea a soul could actually divide itself or be split into two parts, one masculine, one feminine, and that they are eternally searching for each other. A number of his students and a number of his teachers also taught or believed in the same thing, that they had actually encountered this in their philosophical ponderings and studies. But they said they kind of intimated that this was a rarity. It wasn't something that everybody experiences at some point in their journey through life, but that it was a rare event, that it was something that the gods had something to do with, or some kind of celestial influence or purpose to it. But there were also other connections. There were other types of connections. There were other types of manifestations of this energy that took on different forms or had different functions or purposes within the individual's own lives. It wasn't just all for some, great divine purpose. So I'd like to speak a little bit about redefining or taking a look at some of the terminology that we've become accustomed to, first of all, so we have a baseline of understanding. And the first thing that I feel, or in my studies, and I did this, I went down this route. I have to give you a little background. I personally went down this route after my Kundalini awakening in 1994, which was partially triggered, or a partial responsibility for this event happening in my life, which was all mine, or my soul's, was the encounter with a very powerful soulmate, twin flame type of person. I'd say kind of part of my tribe, part of my soul family, that came along to sort of wake me up. All right, let's just call it that. And in that heart opening, in that awareness, that spiritual emergency and emergence that occurred in the wake of that, I learned a lot about this kind of stuff. When I began to investigate it, I began to be very tantalized into looking into it. There were a lot of books coming out at the time in the mid-1990s around this subject, and I wondered what its spiritual significance was. What does it mean? What is the personal interpretation? What does it engender? What does it lead one to? So in the understanding, everybody at that time, the highest, one of the high numbers or high names, for these types of relationships was soulmate or twin flame. There was actually a book called Soulmates and Twin Flames that was a channeled piece by Claire Hartsong and another channeler back in that time period, channeled from an ascended master named Saint Germain, and you can still find that book. It's still out there, and that was one of the books that kind of set me off on my little search, and found a lot of other books that mention this kind of phenomena. But to me, the soulmate is really a member of one's extended family. They're more like friends with different roles. So over a period or course of time, we group together with like resonance people. So, these people come in and out of our lives in different forms and different lifetimes for different personal reasons, different soul reasons, different tasks. One of them could be a situation in which you were born into a family and you had a very strong loving bond with one of your parents or with a particular sibling. And then that in another lifetime, you might come back into that relationship again with that particular soul, that particular entity, and you might be married as a couple. Or you might be the child of two others that you are in that soul family with. So these are, it could be even your boss, or it could be a coworker, or it could be somebody you studied with, or somebody that's just a close friend, or a coworker, or somebody that you are with in a very stressful situation, like being on a battlefield, and this is your buddy, your best buddy that you're fighting alongside, or sometimes fighting against. So these soulmate relationships are kind of based on unconscious agreements and contracts to explore certain experiences, take on certain lessons or tasks. Sometimes they can be with members of another group that's close in resonance or harmony with your own soul family. But there, what the basis of all this is karmic ties. The karmic ties form, and then they're unraveled, or they're dissolved, and so everybody is sort of like working in a school together through time and space. All right, kind of imagine that. So that's the soulmate definition, as I understand it. They're like growing partners you grow with, people that you're comfortable with. You're just comfortable with, and it's like, yeah, it's okay, it's easy, it's nothing hugely spectacular, there's no major fireworks going on, but there's no major growth, it's just comfortable. Or if there are problems, they are manageable to a certain degree. Or, when bigger dramas and traumas show up is usually when there is a very, very deep wound between two souls from a previous experience, a power play or a power struggle that will come up. And so when that happens, it's important to recognize that, they may not be actual enemies per se. They may just be working through something for each other's benefit. So, from our appearances, from the ego appearances, is like, well, this is bad news, and, it's going to end in tragedy and tears. Well, and it usually does. But there's always another cycle in which that can be resolved. So that's the soulmate phenomenon. Now, the other one, which is also interesting, is twin flame or twin ray. I think twin ray is a little bit too esoteric for most people to handle, because it involves a certain type of metaphysical alchemy involving the major rays or color spectrum of spiritual realms. It's a little bit that these individuals that are twin flames have worked through a lot of those soulmate connections over time, or they're part or relationship in a particular soul group or family, is that they are in such high resonance with each other that they feel closer. The bond is more intense. The resonant frequency is closer. And they almost feel compelled. It feels fated in a certain way. You recognize certain aspects of that other person that embody things that you want to embody, or embody things that you feel like you don't have. So there's something that's undeveloped, there's something that's underdeveloped, or something latent in yourself that they represent and have a grasp of. And it works the other way, too. All right? So there's sort of this coming into a deeper integration process, possibly, between these two individuals. Now, meeting Elizabeth Gilbert, popular author, she has made some comments about this because she's had quite a direct experience with some soulmate and twin flame things, in which she proclaims that meeting your soulmate is really sort of a can opening experience. It's like it's supposed to kick your ass into gear and get you moving on your own path. That to me is more the twin flame experience. And you can encounter more than one twin flame. You can have more than one encounter, even in a singular lifetime. Not always, but it can happen. In my particular case, it has happened twice. And so what that is it causes you to shift into a new frame of reference. It causes you to move in a new direction. It helps you break free from a habituated pattern or series of behaviors or beliefs or situations that don't really serve your growth and evolution any longer. So the twin flame experience is a lot stronger, a lot more dramatic, and a lot more effective in terms of being able to actually help you change your course in a very dynamic fashion. The third type is the one that is probably the most rare and is also harder to identify or pin down exactly, because it embodies a lot of the characteristics of a twin flame relationship or twin flame encounter. But it is probably the thing that embodies the true beloved in the embodiment of another person. It's the other self, all right? It's the eternal other, or it's the divine counterpart. It's the mirror. And what that type of relationship is, according to Plato and other sources, that this is a soul that for one reason or another has subdivided into a predominantly masculine and predominantly feminine form, but they can change gender throughout their lifetimes that they experience individually. They can become male or female at any given time. But they don't run into each other a whole lot. But even if they do, or maybe they don't run into each other at all, they aren't brought together at all until a specific time in which their evolution has afforded them the opportunity to be able to embody and ground the energy of their connection in the physical realm. So that's why it's rare in that sense. And in that sense, the two people will be so identical, even though they have had different upbringings, backgrounds, may have disparate, a lot of gap in age or a gap in cultural upbringing or whatever. There's still such a similarity and resonance. It's almost like really a close match, as close a match as you possibly can get without two people actually looking like congenital twins that are coming from the same mother. They're actually in situations that I've encountered during my studies that some twin flames and some twin souls actually do look like each other, even though there might be a gap of 20 or 30 years between the two of them. They actually have the same physical characteristics. This is not accidental, all right? The other thing that I think can happen with a twin soul experience is that it is so powerfully energetic, it galvanizes people into either a black or a white camp. In other words, the energy is so strong, the reflection is so powerful that if someone's shadow side is completely triggered by it, that they may actually their behavior changes drastically, and they will attempt to interfere or attack the connection between these two people purely out of either envy or fear, usually, or a sense of trying to control the situation. The other response pattern is typically one of hearts opening, people finding themselves feeling energized, warmed in the love that is radiating from these two people. And there's a certain sense of underlying joy and happiness that is quite palpable. That is something that spiritual aspirants talked about in terms of the relationship between the yogi Yogananda and his who he called or referred to as his mother, which was his partner. It wasn't his true physical mother for the lifetime. But there was such a blissful harmony that would happen in the gatherings that Yogananda spoke at, because she would sit quietly behind him. It was the union of the two of them in that audience or in that space that would cause people to have some transcendental experiences, or at the very least, a sense of harmony and peace and bliss that they hadn't experienced up until that point. Now, there may be some other terms that have been floated out there, like divine complement, or like I said, divine counterpart, or perfect partner. All these are just other labels for the similar things that would be soulmate or twin flame, from my experience. And it is the twin soul one that carries the most bang for the buck in terms of how it can affect others, or make or create or facilitate a change in human consciousness. I think the story of the Curies, who brought through a number of medical breakthroughs, would be classified either a twin flame or a twin soul connection, type of connection, because they had a purpose together. They were in what they were doing, completely supporting each other. Some of the great combinations of poetry and prose of some of the great writers of the 18th and 19th century, who had these relationships that were quite storied. I think those kind of connections can't be ignored on a historical basis, because they do seem to have an effect on the cultural perceptions. They do have a strong effect on our spiritual understandings. So what is the purpose of all this? What is the soul up to here? Why do we feel attraction to each other? What does the beloved mean to you? What does the beloved mean to anyone? It's an embodiment of something spectacularly beyond one's own consciousness or awareness. The beloved is in oneself. It is your inner masculine or feminine. If you're a woman, then it's going to be your inner masculine, or your anima. That's the psychological or spiritual archetype that represents the opposite polarity. And so that can be seen as your primary beloved, or your primary association is with your own soul and with spirit that gave birth to that soul, that you are an individuation, a singularity of all that is. And that is why this work that I'm involved in, understanding about how to connect with and listen to that voice or that beloved, and creating that relationship first. In some of the more popular culture terms, it's been, learning to self-love, learning self-acceptance, learning to appreciate and understand one's own shadow side, being willing to accept and love all parts of yourself. That's one route. Another route is to celebrate the beloved within as your guide or your guardian angel. But there's also a both and to this, not an either or. To focus entirely on the inner relationship is just one part of the journey of life. To realize that for every nuance that occurs on the inside, there has to be a correspondence on the outside, is just natural. So the beloved appears when we are ready with our relationship, when we are no longer running our lives or basically reacting to life from our wounded places, that we have taken the time to explore our traumas, our wounds, that we have taken the time to find out who our inner child is, which is also another aspect of the beloved within, and nurtured that and connected with it and learned to reparent that, because a lot of relationship problems start with our primary relationship we had or didn't have with our primary parent in this lifetime. But one of the things that I'd like to emphasize here is that primary bond or lack of attachment or broken attachment stems from other lifetimes. As a karmic or evolutionary astrologer, it's not about just what happened in this childhood that you had. That is a manifestation from other times. Otherwise, you wouldn't have set that up for this lifetime. You wouldn't be facing some of the relationship challenges or, being on your own or being alone right now if you hadn't set that up in a different experience. Now, setting it up doesn't mean I'm completely responsible for everything that happens, even when I didn't know I was doing it. I think that's ridiculous. If you were unaware and unconscious about what was happening, then, self-blame doesn't work, doesn't help. But when you understand that this is a journey of discovery and, in a way, sort of an experiment, you're less apt to be so hard on yourself about the things that have happened in your life, where things didn't work out in relationships, where somebody's betrayed you or hurt you, where you've hurt and betrayed somebody else, where you're disappointed, let down, any of those things, okay? It's when we become conscious and we understand what it is that we want, and we get clear about who we are, and we love all that, then there's a potential for meeting the beloved on the outside that will complement us deeply and help us to bring forward our deepest gifts, help us to heal our deepest wounds, and we will do the same for them. So it's a journey of mutuality and equality. And there's one thing we desperately need in this situation that we face right now is a healthier relationship between human beings and the world environment, with nature, a healthier relationship with our own psyches and our own shadow and our own inner child, a healthier relationship with one another, and working through the conditionings that we have suffered as a species for especially the last 2,500 to 3,000 years, and coming into a spiritual and metaphysical understanding that we are meant to be more loving, that we were never designed to be competitors in a sense, that this is a learned behavior, an inculcated behavior, that we are desirous of and needing mutuality of support, affection, touch, intimacy, and that without that, we revert, we become angry, we become predatory, we become aggressive, we become unlike ourselves. We become something that we don't like. We become the very things that start to manifest in our environment in the form of, personas in the entertainment industry or in politics or in corporate worlds as being undesirable or damaging or dangerous or just plain unlikable, or really sort of a threat to our security. So the whole concept of meeting the beloved is not just an inside job, it's an inside-outside job. To see the beloved in everyone is to see the face of spirit, is to see the face of God or goddess, or however you want to think about that. And when you start becoming that inclusive and that expansive, love knows no boundaries. It flows in all directions all the time. But when you get this combination happening with two individuals so closely attuned to each other, and maybe there actually are couples that are two halves of the same coin, then you have a galvanizing power that can actually open up people to being able to see a possibility of something different. This is what I'm witnessing. This is what I'm seeing. The number of people who are now talking about, there's even couples on YouTube and websites and everything that are hosted by twin flames who have come together, who know what they are, who know who each other is, and who are actively helping others deal with this phenomena, because it is really up. It's really up right now. You just have to put in one of those terms in Google, and you will find hundreds, if not thousands, of hits of people that are doing counseling work, healing work, helping people with their inner child stuff, with discovering the beloved within, helping people through their stumbling blocks regarding the intensity that happens between two people that are so close in resonance when they meet each other. They think they have found the holy grail of everything. And then there's usually a stage or a place in that relationship, and one or the other goes, this is too much. I'm freaking out. I'm going back to life I knew. That's called the runner phase. And this back and forth kind of thing can be extremely frustrating and traumatizing for a lot of people. Or some people hang on well past the time they should and just don't know how to let go, and they make their own lives miserable. And they actually, in a way, they're actually making their twin miserable, because they're not getting past their attachment or their need for that attachment. So there's a lot of permutations, a lot of psychological, emotional, and spiritual issues tied up with this. But it's accelerating, and it's accelerating every month and every year, and has been for years on end now. Specifically since about 2012. Maybe a little bit before, but it's been in the news, or it's been in the cultural language for well over 25, 30 years. It's part of the dialogue, along with lots of other things. So why is this important? Especially in some segments or aspects of relationship or tantra or the popular culture, which doesn't even want to believe in finding the one. Granted, that puts things on such a pedestal, and it puts things on such a mountaintop that most people go, well, this is ridiculous. It doesn't exist. There's just no possibility that it does exist. But if it didn't exist, it wouldn't be in the conversation. It wouldn't be in our cultural memory. The one can mean a lot of things. It could mean the one spirit, the oneness of all that is, the one beloved, the one perfect match in everything. We see that perfect matching going on all the time within nature, but we also see the diversity in nature, and we think, well, which side is it? Which is it? If one species mates for life and another species doesn't, what does that mean? But I think we can tend to project our human self, our anthropomorphic self, into animal species and find all kinds of justifications and reasons for things, and not really get any closer to the truth about who we are. So I feel that the whole dialogue around this subject has to be approached with hopefulness, but not too much emotionality. Respect for the emotions, respect for the emotional body and the needs of the inner child. It also needs to be approached spiritually, I think, predominantly, is to understanding and with a sense of curiosity. Ask, what is this for? Is there a higher knowing or a higher wisdom that can inform any one of us as to what the purpose of this phenomena is, and how does it help humanity at large? How does it help the species evolve and survive, and not just survive, but thrive? How do we come into a deeper understanding of our origins and our reasons for being and our history and what we're here to do and how we're supposed to live? How can we, what do we listen to? What do we acknowledge? What do we make room for? So even though the Hollywood version of the ultimate romance and finding the one isn't a perfect model by any means, and I don't advocate it as being a final and be-all and end-all of an example, there are plenty of examples in history, and there are plenty of examples in our anthropological and religious studies of what this phenomena means and what it does, how it affects people, how it can be both sometimes tragic but also incredibly uplifting. Yeah, the story of Romeo and Juliet was a tragedy. But what was the beauty in the tragedy was how they felt about each other, how they completely and totally were so devoted to each other, in spite of all that was trying to tear them apart. So the one thing that I think love shows us, and the beloved is trying to show us, is the resiliency of love itself, the permanency of love, the strength of love, the power that it has to transform people. And that is worth paying attention to, even with all these different labels and all of these different relationship things going on, that as a species, especially our Western cultures, we need, I'm not going to leave out the Eastern cultures in this. No. Not when we have countries that still practice the subjugation of women and the demeaning of the feminine. It doesn't matter what religious or political or cultural identification you have. It's just wrong. It's just wrong. It's what's poisoned us for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and it's not going to change. We're not going to escape the worst of the effects of our mistakes unless we understand that it all starts at home, so to speak. It all starts in our relationship with ourselves, but also with those of the other gender. And the other gender can be, gay or lesbian as well. I'm not excluding that, because usually even in those connections, there is one that is a little bit more masculine and another one that's a little bit more feminine. The masculine-feminine has nothing to do with male, female, or girl-boy. Let's be very clear about that. And in terms of the beloved, it doesn't see gender. It sees love. It sees the harmony and resonance that is there, heart to heart, soul to soul, spirit to spirit. It doesn't care about philosophy. It doesn't care about your beliefs or your opinions. It has no patience for your bias or your bigotry. It just is what it is and just lives as it feels to live. It doesn't go into judgment, but it doesn't go into trying to please everybody either. That's one of the things that we have to avoid assiduously, is the idea in our own relationships with ourselves and with those we love and we're close to, that we don't have to please everyone. We don't have to try to make everyone feel okay about us or about those that we are in relationship with. It's impossible. There's always going to be somebody who's going to find some fault with the situation, with some fault with the image that they have of two people who are deeply and totally in love and devoted to each other. That's just human behavior. But human behavior is a changing landscape. And the only way it can change is that hostility is met with steadfast love, not just kind of like fluffy pink bunnies, but with a love that is fierce and determined and conscious. So when I use the word, for example, sacred, I am talking about making things conscious, being consciously engaged with the sacredness or the holiness or the value of love, the value of life, the value of sustainability, the value of prosperity and abundance in all definitions, not just one or two. So here we are with soulmates and twin flames and twin souls, but we're all part of the same human family. We're all part of the same cosmic family. And each relationship builds us up or it can tear us down. But everything is spiraling upwards all the time. Evolution keeps moving to another level on the spiral. So the next time, and the next time, and the next time, you will have the opportunity to make it better, to get it more loving, to have it become more enjoyable. Happiness is just the outward evidence of an innate joy that just celebrates the caring and the loving kindness of one soul to another, towards another, and it is without qualification. What do I mean by without qualification? There are no conditions on it. There is only the desire to help the other one be happy and be all that they are, all that they can be, without losing their own self in the process. And this is the desire of the other in that partnership. Each is there to help each other to grow in a sustainable, loving, and happy way. You can learn how to be happy on your own. True enough. You can learn how to get along just fine on your own. True enough. But you are not an island in life. You are not a singularity separate from the flow and the river of life. You are part of the deal. You are part of the game. You are part of the story. And so what's important, spiritually speaking here, is that there is no aspect of this journey that you can take that in some way, shape, or form isn't defined by how you relate to everyone or relate to significant others and how you relate to the environment and how you relate to yourself. You're in the relation game. You're in the relating game here. You're in the relating game, I think, no matter where you go. At the very least, you'll run into yourself. You know, wherever you go, there you are, as they say. You will relate to your own mind when you have reflection and meditation. You will be relating to that. You will be relating to the all that is. You will be relating to the guy that works in your car or the checkout girl at the grocery store. You're still having a relationship. You're relating, interacting. There's a flow. There is a magic to it. There is a function and purpose to it that in some ways is so mysterious and so intricate that we'll never understand how it actually functions. It goes deep. It goes very, very deep. And so with what's unfolding on the planet right now, and with what's unfolding politically, economically, climate change, the need to reinvent or, I don't want to use the word spiritualize, I'd say humanize capitalism, or create a new system that replaces it, or to create a new system that replaces our political system, or a system of self-governance. That's all part of this stuff about meeting the beloved. There is, to my mind and my understanding and my feeling, no difference. You know, so if anyone who listening to this show has come to it thinking this is just about your own personal satisfaction or finding your own perfect personal nirvana or heaven with somebody special, no, that's not. That's certainly part of it. That's certainly important to have that connection, to have that enjoyment, that pure sensate enjoyment, and celebrate that. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. In fact, there's too many people that have given up on that. Or there's a lot of people that it's given up on them, and they sure wish they could get it back. You know? Look at the proliferation of cuddle parties. We're starving for connection. We're starving for a meaningful encounter with just somebody else who sees us, who can listen to us, who can touch us. Who can touch us, or who can feel touched by us. To open to love is what we're here about. And I was reminded today by one of my clients I do coaching with, a quote by the author Sarah Addison Allen. If love isn't a little bit scary, you're not doing it right. That caught her attention, and it sure got mine. See, my personal journey, and this is a preface for the next show, which, by the way, is going to air on Valentine's Day. And this show is going to be with my beloved, with my twin soul, with my sweetheart. And it's going to talk about the scary bit. It's going to talk about the tough stuff, the tough love, the tough decisions. We're going to talk about all the things that will come up and get in your way and make it look like the most impossible road possible when you commit to meeting the beloved within and the beloved without. When you commit to something that isn't your own invention or your own will. When you surrender your control to something bigger than yourself. We don't have it all figured out, folks. We don't have the control we think we have, except to explore our own natures, our own traumas, our own beliefs, our own reactions to things, and try to understand where they come from and be as loving and devoted and dedicated to healing all parts of ourselves, and in turn making some sort of positive and loving contribution to others around us and to the societies we're in. Very, very useful. Very, very important. But it takes the courage and it takes the guts to take a risk. To risk everything sometimes for what you feel and know is right in your heart, in spite of all evidence to the contrary. In spite of everything you were taught or everything you were spoon-fed is the way life should be and the way you should behave in it and the way that you have to conduct your relationships like your parents did or the way your church told you to. You have to drop all that. You have to sacrifice it onto the altar of your own being and to the beloved within, or you will not have this transcendental opportunity. That's not a threat. That's just merely the way it is. That's just merely the way it is. You got to make space. You got to make space, and you got to relax. You've got to let go. You've got to allow, because that's what love is about, allowing. And if you're not willing to allow, then the bigger opportunity, the bigger love, the bigger possibility will elude you. It will elude all of us. And the potential solutions, the potential solutions to all of the problems we are currently faced with will be unavailable or harder to find, harder to see, harder and more difficult to implement. So I hope you have found something useful and valuable in my little show today around meeting the beloved and separating fact from fiction, regarding what these different aspects of that is, soulmates, twin flames, twin souls, etc., and that it will allow you to become more intrigued or more interested in exploring this aspect of spirituality, this aspect of human experience. I would certainly hope so, because it's fascinating. Yeah, we're all fascinated with love stories and romance, and we're all fascinated with certainly what's going on in the world today to some extent or another. Don't hide your head under your pillow, and don't try to live on an island, because you will be missed. Your contribution will be missing in action. Your participation is important. The frequency that you bring and that you hold is important. And when you can combine that with another, and then that grouping or that coupling can combine that with a community, anything's possible. More becomes possible because of the combined energy, the combined love. Everything becomes more possible. Things become easy. You know, there is a certain truth to the fact that things are probably meant to be easy. We make them hard. We make them complicated. So, what do? Well, I'd like to let you know that I like doing this kind of work with people and with couples. And if you go to www.isaacgeorge.com, you'll find out more about what I offer and what I do. And I'm a spiritual mentor and heart and soul coach, and I specialize especially in people who want to work through the issues that they need to work through to be able to prepare themselves for this kind of relationship to come into their life, to meet the beloved, and to prepare the ground for that to occur, for their own journey, for their own joy, and for their own evolution, and in turn do something that might really make a big difference in a lot of other people's lives. So thanks again for listening and tuning in. And if you want to find out more about me, it's www.isaacgeorge.com. Take care.